This video is for you e4 players that are trying to find a response against the Sicilian Defense. I mean, the Sicilian Defense, in my opinion, the most complicated opening in all of chess. Trying to find a response against it can be very difficult, but I think that this video can help you guys a ton because I believe that this move, played on move 2, is the most underrated option that White has against the Sicilian. Okay, and there's a few reasons for this. First off, it's sound. Okay, it's not one of these moves that just gives the opponent an advantage and then we're like, okay, well, we hope you mess it up, right? It's sound. On top of that, it's dangerous. Okay, especially if Black accepts this gambit. I mean, they can fall into trouble fast. And the third reason why it's so dangerous is because Sicilian players don't know what the heck it is. Okay, I guarantee you, nearly every Sicilian player you go up against has either never seen it, never heard of it, or never thought of it as a legit option for White. And that's because it looks kind of silly, but trust me, it's not. Okay. Now, what the heck is this? What is this underrated chess opening option that we have against the Sicilian Defense that has helped me win 2 out of 3 games online, which is pretty good in terms of percentages against the Sicilian Defense? Okay. Obviously, we play this move e4. Now we see the Sicilian. There's so many moves the Sicilian player has to worry about, right? And most of the time, and I can speak on this from personal experience, is dealing with the move knight of 3, right? I played the Sicilian Najdorf, okay, which, you know, I got my inspiration from Gary Kasparov, as this was his main weapon against e4 for many years. But I played the Sicilian Najdorf. I studied theory for hundreds, if not thousands of hours, right? You got to worry about knight of 3. You got to look at a move like d4 with the Smith-Morey. You got to look at the Grand Prix attack. You got to look at moves like c3 or b3 with the Snyder. There's a bunch of different things that you got to look at. Most of my time was spent looking at moves like knight of 3, knight c3, and d4. Okay, c3 a little bit as well. That was about it. The move I'm recommending is a3, okay, with the Mengarini Variation / delayed Wing Gambit. Now, some of you guys might just think I'm crazy by calling this, you know, I mean, just a very dangerous move for White. But I cannot state enough just how incredible this opening can be. Okay. Now, I learned this from Simon Williams to start, and I've been playing it for years. Simon Williams has played a3 in some of the most important games in his life while he was going and trying to earn that Grandmaster title. So, I mean, he's played this against very high-level players and has gotten very good wins with it. Okay, now we're going to look at, okay, what the heck are we doing with this a3 move? And what are the most popular responses that we can see from Black, and how do we respond? This video is an introductory video. Okay, I'm going to kind of give you what Black plays and some ideas that you can think about and work with. This is this is one of those openings that's pretty flexible, okay, in the sense of we don't have to play the same thing every single time. There's some lines where it's very recommended, and then there's other lines where it's like, okay, the floor is yours, right? Do what you may. So I'll just say we have this move a3. And again, guys, let me just say this. I played the Sicilian Defense. I already said I studied hundreds, thousands of guys. I never saw this move. At least I can't remember ever seeing the move a3 played against me. Okay, and I definitely didn't know what it was called. I didn't know what it was. I didn't think it was very good. I'll tell you that much, right? Let's see why this is so dangerous. Okay, now the move that I see the most is probably this move of knight c6, and it makes sense. I mean, why wouldn't Black just develop and kind of, you know, attack the square that we're trying to gear up for? I mean, if we're not playing the move of b4, a3 is somewhat pointless, right? The only way I could see that a3 is actually worth something, which, by the way, I've seen Magnus Carlsen do this, is by putting a bishop on c4 and then dropping it to a2, so you have that little escape square. Okay, so that is a benefit, and I've seen Magnus Carlsen play a3 and continue later on with a bishop c4 developmental move. But what are we really trying to do? We're trying to pull off b4, right? And in this case, that's exactly what we're going to do. Okay, most of the time when I see this, Black will just take and take again, right? They oftentimes don't want to deal with us, you know, kicking their knight all over the place, right? So they'll play a move like taking the pawn. Black's up a pawn now, but I'd take White here any day of the week. I don't care who I'm playing against. We have this move of c3. The knight has to go back. I mean, I guess you could go to a6, but what are you doing, right? Why is that helpful? I don't know. So you go back to c6. We play d4. If you want to play quietly here, right? If you want to play a move like d6 or something, I mean, you know, or e6, whatever it may be, we have a ton of space. I mean, a very nice central advantage, easy development going forward, right? You can throw in a move like f4 if you want to, or you can just develop rapidly, right? Castle king side. That bishop's going to be untouchable because the knight cannot attack it. Eventually, we can put both of our rooks on the B and A files, kind of in Banco Gambit type fashion, but from the white side. And black has to constantly be worried about, continued pawn pushes, steamrolling them down the center of the board. Now, most of the time here, I see the move d5. In this case, I take, and then I play knight a3. This is my favorite position in the entire Mengarini Variation, delayed wing gambit, whatever you want to call it. This is my favorite position. I win nearly every single game I reach with this. Okay, close to 90% of the games, I get a one position because it's so hard for black to play. Okay, now, the best move for black is surprisingly queen a5. Now, in that case, it's still dead even. It's not like black's winning or anything like that. So that does show us that we have some good compensation. If you see that move, you can play a move like bishop d2, and your rook is eyed towards their queen. Still a very hard position for black to navigate there. But what do I usually see? Well, I see this move of e5 literally all the time. And keep in mind, guys, I'm playing against 2,000, 2,100, 2,200, 2,300 plus players, most of the time. And I see this move quite a bit. Now, what was the point of knight a3, right? I mean, it looks kind of weird. I mean, why do I love this position so much? It's because we're looking to play this move of knight b5. Okay, knight a3 to knight b5. Notice what we're threatening. We're threatening c7. And in this case, if the queen drops back, we have this move of d5, kicking the knight. If black runs away, we play d6, kicking the knight. I can't tell you how many times I've had this in my own games. If you bring the knight to c6, we get a little fork, and that's great for us. And if you go to g6, that's even better. Okay, there's a lot of moves that we have here. The computer actually likes a rook takes a7. Isn't that something, right? But I just play knight c7. Okay, knight c7 check. And here you actually have to give up your queen, because if you don't give up your queen and you run with the king, we have mate. The game's over. That's it. Right. So we go back to knight a3. e5 doesn't really do much to help, okay? Especially as knight b5 comes in, and especially if the queen runs back, this d-pawn is running down the board like crazy. Knight c7, bishop b5 check ideas in the air. This is not looking good for black. What about the move of knight f6? I see this move all the time as well. Maybe black thinks that this slows down d5, but it doesn't. Because we play knight b5, threaten that fork, and when the queen drops back, okay, by the way, guys, you could play a move like king d8. I don't see it that often. And I don't blame black for not wanting to play a move like king d8. If we do that, we're just going to keep developing. Your king can't castle. This is an open game here. We can throw our pawns down like crazy. So most of the time, you see black just drop back. In this case, we can still play d5, because if you capture with the queen, right? Knight c7 check, we're forking the king and the queen and the rook, but we're going to take the queen there. And if you take with the knight, we can actually capture that knight off, powerhouse fork, take the queen, we're up a pawn. Black has nothing to show for it. In fact, everything they do have to show for it, white has a better game here. Their king cannot castle, our king can, and they're down a pawn. We're just up a pawn here. I'll take it. All right. Going back, what other moves could we see here? Again, let's just get this out the way, right? e5, knight b5, right? The queen drops back, the pawn pushes, knight f6. Seems natural. We still play knight b5. The queen goes back, and we can start to chase this knight around. By the way, one more thing I want to add to this, okay? Let's say we have this position, and the queen goes back, we play d5. If we see a move like knight e5, bishop f4 is a killer move. Okay, you see the knight come back, we throw in a check, we have mate threats on the way if king d7 happens. I've seen it before where my opponents will play knight d7 defending, and then let's say, for example, I keep adding the pressure onto this knight and I see a move like f6. Notice just how weak and vulnerable black's position is here. E6 in particular is just calling out for us to take advantage of. It might look good to bring a knight back like that, but what I'm going to recommend is you bring this knight towards d4, because this knight's actually doing a pretty good job, right? It's attacking dark squares, and on top of that, you can't kick the knight out, because if you take, we win your rook. So why not, if we have an active knight and a somewhat okay knight, why not bring the worst knight into the action, right? We're now looking at e6. c7 is still, on our radar. The h5 to e8 diagonal is not looking good for black. All that to say, this is over +4 for white. This is crushing. Okay. So knight a3, this is a very hard move to play against. And again, queen a5 is the main move here, right? But in that case, we can just play bishop d2. I still like white's chances. And And I just want to get this out of the way as well. Okay, a6, we just looked at this idea. When I see a6, you could still play knight b5. This doesn't actually really stop anything, because if they take your knight, you just take the rook on a8. Right? Our rook is way more active than theirs. So if this pawn ever leaves, guess what? We win your rook. What we could do, though, is this move of knight c4. And I didn't actually know about this until, later on into playing this opening and plugging this into Stockfish and all that kind of stuff. But, I mean, b6 is a glaring weakness. We are threatening to drop our knight in there. And if the queen drops back, I mean, why not just start kicking that knight around? Kick that knight right back to b8. We can develop our bishop going for this square. And this is what a gambit is all about, right? The Mengarini Variation / delayed Wing Gambit. This is a great position to work with, okay? Now, there's a lot of gambits that aren't sound. And what I mean by that is, with perfect play, your opponent is going to win, right? But in this case, Stockfish gives white a slight advantage, and we're down a pawn. So that shows you just how much compensation that we have. The game's not over, okay? We do got to play with some accuracy here, but so does black. In fact, the only move here that gives black a fighting chance is knight d7, stopping us from just throwing a knight into that square. But even then, let's just keep developing. Develop quickly. We have some great space here. I mean, black has a long hill to climb. All right, so all that to say, okay, knight a3, amazing move here for white. Going back to the beginning, we're playing a3, and against knight c6, we're just pushing. And if you take, that's fine. We have c3, d4, takes, and knight a3. If you memorize any line, I recommend that you memorize this one. Great play for white here. Now going back, we play a3. Now black doesn't have to play knight c6. So what other options does black have? Another move they have, which allows them to accept the gambit, is this move of e6, right? The pawn and the bishop going for the square. Let's just say we don't really care. We're playing b4 anyways. And if you end up accepting the pawn here and taking with the bishop, I used to play c3 and d4, and this is playable, right? I mean, you still get that great central advantage, all that kind of good stuff. But bishop b2 is what Simon Williams recommends here, and can lead to a pretty fun game. Okay, we're attacking this pawn. Sometimes I have opponents play bishop f8, but again, I mean, you're just way behind in development. I mean, is that a fun position to play with and work with? I don't think it is. Okay. Knight f6 is the computer move. Against that, we are kicking this knight around like there's no tomorrow. You can't come here or there. If you go to g8, I mean, what are you doing? You're just going in circles. If you come to e4, queen g4 is a nasty move, attacking the knight. If the knight moves, the bishop falls. We're attacking the pawn on g7 in that case, right? I mean, this is just great for us. So e5 is played. You got to play knight d5, and in this case, we continue to kick that knight around. We cannot give black time to breathe here, develop, all that kind of stuff. We're down a pawn. We got to make the most of it. We kick this knight. Now here, there's a few different squares that black can go to, right? Now, first off, knight f4. This can work, but I will say that the only square this knight really has going forward that's safe is g6. So we could even look at a move like h4, right? And, if black's not careful here, this knight could get into some serious trouble. So black there needs to play a move like h5. Black can do this, but I still like white's game here. There's a lot of different things that we can do. We can develop our knight. We can play a move like g3, kicking the knight around. We can play knight c3. I just feel like this knight's kind of running around without much of a purpose at the end of the day. Okay. Now, going back, we play the move c4. Looking at these three moves, first off, if you see a move like knight e7, there's different options that you have here. This is one of those positions that's pretty flexible, and this is one of those positions where black does have an advantage according to Stockfish. I'm not going to sit here and lie to you and say that white is winning this. We're not, but black's not winning either. I mean, if we're down a pawn, this is how I think about it. If we're down a pawn, right, and the score is -1 for black, that kind of means that we're down a pawn, right? I mean, besides being down a pawn, the position's somewhat even. But in this case, we're down -0.2. So we're down, 0.2, and we're down a pawn, right? If we're down 0.2 or 0.3 around that range, and we're down a full pawn, that shows us that we have some compensation, right? If we have a dead even evaluation, but I'm down a rook, that means that I have compensation for that rook according to the engine every time, right? Now, okay, we see this move knight e7. There's some moves you can play here, right? You can go with a move like, the computer likes bishop e2. I find it a little slow. The computer also likes knight f3. I think that knight f3 is a solid option. Just develop the knight, develop the second one. If the knight develops here, you can just, develop your bishop. You're trying to castle fast. Notice, by the way, anytime d5 is played in this kind of position, we can capture. And all of a sudden, we got a pretty active bishop. aim towards the king side of the board, right? In this case, play a move like d4, nice central advantage. White with a solid game here, okay? White with a solid game. That said, this isn't my favorite position, okay? And I do think going back to knight e7, queen g4 could be quite a bit of fun, especially in faster time controls. We're attacking this pawn on g7. And yeah, I mean, if we see a move here like knight g6, let's play h4. Let's try to see if we can kick this knight around. If black doesn't play h5, they may be in some serious trouble. They have to play h5 so that we don't have the option to, okay? If we can kick this knight, that would be great, because the knight's going to have to run. G7's going to fall in a lot of cases. I mean, that's great for us. So let's just say black plays very well here and plays h5. Queen g3. We're keeping an eye on this knight, and then we're playing bishop d3. Notice that we have e5 very well defended. We're now threatening to win the knight on g6 and then capture on g6 as well with the queen. And okay, if you come back, you know, defending it with a knight or something like that, we can play bishop a3, look to trade off for this bishop, but more importantly, make it so that d6, there's no dark squared bishop to defend that square. I mean, black's dark squared weaknesses are very apparent here. And a move like knight b5 and knight b6 is something that black needs to be very concerned about. So that's something to think about, okay? Now that's knight e7. By the way, with knight b6 and especially knight c7, but with both of these, rook a3 is an option. Do you have to play it? No, but you can. And in this case, we're going to go over what happens if bishop takes, right? I mean, we keep going to a3. We play pawn a3. We play rook a3. Everyone's wondering what the heck is going on here, besides us, obviously. But okay, we play rook a3. We're going to go over bishop takes, but first off, let's just say black goes, you know what, I don't know what the heck you're doing, but I don't want to take that rook. Okay, we slide the rook all the way over to the right. Okay, g6, we play h4, okay? And let's say a move like h5 is played, preventing us from pushing our pawn like crazy here, okay? Preventing us from playing h5 and just going crazy with both of these rooks on these files. And we see a move like h5. Okay, we play knight f3. And again, black's dark squared weaknesses are very apparent. They have 6 out of their 7 pawns on light squares. This is not good for them. This is not good. Okay. Again, we're down a pawn, but the position is about dead even, which shows us that we have compensation. And I'm going to go out on a limb and say that, I mean, it's not really much of a limb. It's kind of common sense, but this is a harder position for black to play than for white. This is just a hard position to work with. It just is. Okay, let's just say, for example, black goes, you know what, I can't castle queenside because obviously there's so much there. I'm going to castle kingside. Okay, we play a move like knight d4. Now we're eyeing h5, right? We're eyeing the king directly. Okay, there's just so many attacking options here for white, and it's quite a bit of fun. All right, so that's something to think about. Now going back to rook a3, let's say black takes. We capture back with the bishop. How does Stockfish have this at nearly dead even, right? But we're down 3 points in material. Well, let's think about it from black's side. Are we going to be able to castle queenside? I don't know how. It's going to take literally forever. You're going to have to bring your knight here, fianchetto your bishop. I mean, the queen can't. I mean, I guess you could throw the queen out here somewhere. I mean, you can't when the knight's out. But how are you going to develop our piece over there? I don't know. And you can't castle kingside right now because the bishop is slicing and dicing all the way down to f8. Right. Something I see often is a move like knight c6. In this case, for a long time, I was playing d4. Okay. Turns out queen g4 is just much better. Queen g4, attacking the pawn. Again, you can't castle. You can't do it. So you got to play a move like g6 or g5, very ugly, or rook g8. All of those, I like white's game. Let's say g6. Let's play bishop d6. Let's just throw our bishop right into the mix there. The king cannot move anywhere. The queen cannot move anywhere without getting captured. Right. This knight can only move to a6. Who cares? And, on top of that, I mean, if you play a move like knight e7 here, trying to castle, okay, we play knight c3. And the second you do castle, we have a move like queen h4. Notice how we're trying to slice and dice on those dark squares. The bishop is just a monster. We're now threatening to capture that knight. So kicking the bishop out doesn't do anything, but gives us a piece and an exchange. We're looking at knight e4, knight f6 ideas. Maybe knight g5 ideas, but really, I mean, knight e4, knight f6 looks very dangerous. And yeah, I mean, let's just say you move this knight or something. We can take the queen. We're down 3 points in material, but we are now even. And again, I mean, talk about weaknesses here. Just because the queens are off the board, that does not mean that attacking tactical chess is over. We have a great game here as white. Okay, so those are a few different moves to think about, okay? But at the end of the day, we're playing a3, and against that move of e6, we are willing, right, to give up that pawn. First off, we're going to have A and B files, kind of Banco Gambit type fashion on that side. By the way, if you don't know what the Banco Gambit is, I made a video on it, and a lot of other creators on YouTube have as well. Very solid opening for black that a lot of d4 players have a hard time with. But in this case, okay, let's go after that weakness, okay? And if black brings the knight out, which they usually do, we kick the knight. And in this case, we can get busy with the queen if we want to, or just develop naturally. And if the knight goes to b6 or c7, in both of those cases, rook a3 is an option, bringing the rook over to g3 and going crazy on those files. And if they capture back, I mean, the bishop takes back. Oftentimes, we're going to plant our bishop on d6, get the queen involved to get this knight into the action. It's a ton of fun. And I've won a ton of games against master level players in this kind of position very quickly. So up to this point in the video, we've kind of covered the two main moves that I have seen in my personal games, and also the moves that accept the gambit, right? This move of knight c6, black is making it very clear that they're trying to put some pressure on b4. Same with the move of e6, right? This bishop is eyeing up that square on b4. What happens if black sees this move and they go, you know what, I don't care? Well, let's take a look at a few different moves. Okay, first off, there's this move of d5. Now, in this case, we're going to take and we can play knight c3, trying to kick this queen around. Now, it's very interesting. It's interesting comparing one opening to another and the differences and the similarities that they have. This kind of reminds me of the Scandinavian defense for black, but with one minor difference. What is the Scandinavian? Well, we go back to the move of e4, right? Black plays d5 immediately. And in this case, we can take on d5. I personally like knight c3. I have a lot of fun with this move. But all right, let's say we take, right? The queen captures back, we play knight c3. The queen has to run, the knight's here. Now let's go to the position that we have in the Mengarini Variation / delayed Wing Gambit, okay? We have, instead of this position, we have this position. Okay, let's compare them. Scandinavian, Sicilian, Scandinavian, Sicilian. Everything's the same, except there's a pawn on a3 and a pawn on c5. Now, Simon Williams argues that this is better for white. This subtle difference in pawn structure is better for white because of the fact that this queen cannot come to a5 like they usually would, right, in a Scandinavian type position. That's true. This is one advantage of it. I'm also going to say, you know, I do think that this pawn on c5 can be good for black as well, because it gives them a great outpost on d4, and they're eyeing b4 as well. So they get some space. They also get some light squared weaknesses potentially, but they do get some space. Okay, so in my opinion, I'm not going to say this is better or worse than the Scandinavian position. I just think that there's some pros and cons to it from both sides, from both angles. All right. Now in this case, if we see the move of queen d8, which is the stockfish move, by the way, there's a lot of things we can do. We can play a move like knight f3. In this case, b3 is a move that you can play. The computer really likes this. b4 is actually pretty sound. Okay, going back to our b4 ideas. All right, bishop d3 is a move that stockfish seems to like, trying to prep a little knight e4 move. And, you know, I mean, from that point, you can continue developing your pieces and just getting an active game. Okay, castling, kingside, all that good stuff. I usually play bishop e5. It just feels natural to me, you know, just a natural move. Pin the knight. If they unpin it themselves, okay, we castle. We can always take the knight, throw a knight into the center of the board, you know, threaten to give them double isolated and isolated pawns on the queen side. If they defend it, we defend with a rook. I'm going to say this position's around dead even. Okay, around dead even. Slight advantage according to the engine, but about dead even. I don't think either side is looking at this position and going, I'm just crushing this game. Okay, so that's move d5. Okay, if you see d5, you're not going to get, you know, probably an overwhelming edge, but you're not losing either, right? It's just, okay, we're just playing chess at this point. You take the pawn, you kick the queen around, and then you just develop, right? Knight out, bishop out, castle, kingside, etc. Play chess. b4 ideas can be in the air, which is also fun. Now, what else does black have here? There's also this move of d6, and in all honesty, guys, this move annoys me. This move has annoyed me, so I've had to work on it a little bit and look at some of the theory on it. The reason that this can be hard for the Mengarini variation is because black's going, I'm literally not doing anything crazy, right? I'm not accepting the gambit somehow. I'm not even breaking open the center of the board somehow, allowing you to kick my queen. I'm just going to develop. But again, we're totally okay. We're going to play this move of b4, put some pressure on c5. Oftentimes, my opponents will take on b4, and I just don't think this is very good for black because, I mean, it looks as if our A and their C pawns just disappeared. And generally speaking, pawns towards the center of the board in the opening are more valuable because they're a more central aspect to the game, right? I mean, it makes sense, right? I mean, if I had to to drop my E pawn or D pawn, or if I had to drop my H pawn, I'm dropping the H. Okay, I'm not dropping one of my central guys. So in this case, our rook is very active. Their rook is not very active. We're attacking, they're defending. They do have the semi-open C file in the future, but I mean, you know, whenever they play a move like knight C6, we can always consider kicking that knight around. And this rook is very active this early on in the game. And if you try to play G6 now to attack that rook, I mean, there's a lot of different things that we can do. Bishop B2 is one of them. This is a solid move, but you can also just take control of the center as well. All right, so, you know, a decent game there for white, to say the least. I just don't think this helps black. I don't see how making these disappear, which is what you're doing, by the way. When you take here and I take back, you're just making these disappear. How does this help black? I don't know. Now, this move, knight f6, though, this can be hard to deal with, right? This can be a little bit annoying. You know, I've often played a move like knight c3, but I found that bishop b5, Stockfish actually really likes bishop b5 and then d3, okay? d3, the position's just about dead even here. If you see a move like g6, you can tuck your knight and get this rook out of the way. This is a common idea. Whether you play knight c3 or d3 and knight d2, get this rook out of the way, defend the pawn on b4, and we're playing chess, okay? Are we winning? No. Are we losing? No. It really just comes down to preference. Do you like this position? Do you like getting into kind of a funky game like this, or is this your worst nightmare? Let me know down in the comment section below what you think of these lines and if you have any questions at all. Now, the last move that we're going to look at is considered by many to be the best move for black, including myself, okay? And that is this move of g6, okay? I think that this move is, if not the very best, at least tied for the best move, because black is looking to fianchetto their bishop on g7. Right, that's what they're trying to do here. And there's not really much that we can do to stop this. Now, that said, there's a lot of moves here that work, okay? Just because we played a3, that doesn't mean we have to play b4. I've seen Magnus Carlsen bring the knight out, bring the bishop out, play naturally, and then have a little escape square for that bishop. That's a solid way to play this, right? We could even play d4 and try to break this game open right away. If they take, our queen captures back, and we're attacking that rook. Okay, there's a lot of moves we have here. b4 is still playable, though. Okay, if they attack our rook, we develop our knight. If they play d6, just playing casual chess, let's throw in a check, right? Let's trade. Let's start trading. Let's develop our knight. Okay, again, if you take on b4, I just don't see how does making these two disappear help us as black, right? I mean, our rook's just more active. I like this for white. I think this is a solid position to work with, okay? Now, if you see a move like knight c6, now I'm also going to warn you guys, I personally, in positions like this, okay, I don't take the pawn most of the time, okay? I wait for black to take. Sometimes I'll push, but honestly, even pushing, I mean, if we push here, black just kind of centralizes their knight, and I'm wondering why this pawn up here helps us. I think rook b1 is a very solid move. The reason I don't like to take on c5 is because now these two pawns disappear, and I just feel like black has a very solid grip. With the queen now looking all the way down to d2, the rook can come in very quickly. I mean, the d file is completely black's domain, and they have a ton of pieces eyeing up that d4 square, which we can't really defend. We can't really make anything about it. The pawn can't drop back. We can't magically drop a pawn on e3. The knight can't move at the moment, so c3 is not an option. White's okay here. I'm not saying white's losing, but I just don't like taking personally. So what I would recommend is just rook b1, right? Keep allowing black to take if they want to, right? And if they do, all right, we take back with the a pawn. We can castle kingside. And another idea here that's pretty helpful, especially if black takes, is playing d4 and queen d3, right? Pawn up, queen up, solid center, solid space on the queen side, easy development. I like white's game. All right. All I have to say, let me know down in the comment section below what you think of this a3 move with the Mengarini / delayed wing gambit type of system here, type of gambit. I'm a huge fan of it. I see this move of knight c6 and e6 all the time. And even when I don't see it, if I see a move like g6, there's a lot of things that we can do against this. Again, we don't have to play b4. I've also played h4, which Stockfish might not like it, but I don't really care. It's a lot of fun. h4. We're trying to play h5, going crazy here. And if black plays it, okay, there's a lot of different things that we can do, right? We have a weakness on g4 because only one pawn can defend it. Same with black. Only one pawn can defend that square of g5 ever. Okay, the computer move here is actually d4, breaking this game open. Queen takes d4. If the knight moves here, you know, we can play a move like e5, although it's not really that good because of knight c6. But we could play a move here like, you know, knight c3. If our queen gets attacked, drop it right back. Okay, keep developing. And yeah, we're just playing chess. Thanks for watching today's video. I wanted to give a big shout out to my Patreon supporters for the month of January in 2023. If you haven't thought about becoming a member yet, I highly encourage you to think about it. You get some exclusive benefits by becoming a member and joining the family. And yeah, it's been quite a bit of fun. We're growing a base here, and I hope to see you there.